When developers start attacking their fans, things never end up going in their direction. They might have the best of intentions. They might think that they're telling one hell of a good story. Just please, see it out, okay? Just give us the benefit of the doubt on this one. But in the case of Final Fantasy XIV, a game that has gone through a belabored development process, I'm old enough to remember when this game was announced alongside Final Fantasy XIII. Okay, like this thing goes back a long time. But there's also a reason that Square Enix, for as many L's as they've taken recently, they know that they're fine because, yeah, at the end of the day, Final Fantasy XIV still prints money for them. You know, the Realm Reborn machine, yeah, that money machine continues to go burr to this very day. So, yeah, with its failure of its initial relaunch, and then only after guys like, you know, Yoshi P, who we're going to hear from here very shortly, took this on as a passion project, made it into this MMO juggernaut that it continues to be to this very day. It also helped that, you know, we also had a steady release of content that was very well received. After the conclusion of the most recent story arc and then just trying to launch into something else in the form of Dawn Trail, well, it hasn't really gone over that well. Because as you can see from that headline right there, Dawn Trail drops to mixed reviews on Steam. And for the longest time, you know, positive, overwhelmingly positive, had been the strata that 14 has found itself in. But why is that the case? Well, it's because they focus on one of the worst characters in the entire series, Woklamau, as it's affectionately referred to as. It's just not interesting, okay? The character's trash, not leading anywhere spectacular, and it's not really that big of a development on the gameplay that's been well established. So that's why people are turning on it. It's really that simple. You make a game that's focused on a character, and then surprise, the character's bad, and the players want to turn on it, okay? And like I said before, you got Yoshi P out here, urges fans to stop attacking the voice actor and the localizers. Well, okay, in the form of the voice actor, because apparently it's a transgender voice actor. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. Frankly, I don't care. You know, there's a non-binary actress in a show that I'm quite partial to, and she does a hell of a good job. A total nutcase off the set, but when it comes to, you know, portraying the character, damn fine job. It's just unfortunate what some of the writers have done with her that season, but, you know, I digress. That's another story for another time. This actor, not exactly that great. Okay, so I don't really know if it's so much of a critique in the form of woke Lamau, cat self, itself, don't know self, or if it's actual attacks. I kind of lean to the former because that's generally what it is. People don't like your character, don't like your performance. I wouldn't necessarily say that's attacking. But when it comes to localizers, oh yeah, they're the bane of the entire industry. So go ahead and critique them to your heart's content. Because that's the thing that we've seen throughout this year, regardless of the medium, okay? We've had localizer problems in manga, in video games, in anime, where you have Western ideologues adapting well-beloved Eastern media and fitting it for modern audiences, ruining the intentions of the author, all to fit their own personal narrative. It's never changes that end up bolstering the content. A good localization, it seems natural, it seems normal, and it fits right in. You shouldn't even notice that they're there. They're like an umpire in baseball. A good one, you don't even notice. A bad one, well, they get a country music record, or when they retire, the entire league celebrates them. Shout out Angel Hernandez. Sticking in the realm of Final Fantasy itself and Square Enix, well, they ended up, you know, facing a heavy tax at the beginning of 2023 with Forspanken coming out in peak Western modern gaming, them learning a big lesson off of that one. And then when it comes to hiring good localizers, I mean, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it's right up there. It's fantastic stuff. Hell, when they were working on the remake project, you know, they cooked way too hard. So much so that in the lead up to Rebirth, they had to go back and change one of the best localized lines in order to make it fit. Even though the original line still stands, they had to make it more literal so more people wouldn't have to delve into hours and hours of theory crafting in order to make more sense. There's good ones, there's bad ones. It's just the bad ones end up cannibalizing the industry. But there's a lot of different aspects that have led to the downfall of the Western and the way that they're trying to dig their tendrils into the Eastern business. But we're seeing quite a bit of pushback, at least on the Eastern front, in regards to Bandai Namco's embrace of DEI policies, you know, Capcom being very stupid. I hope that doesn't continue. Square Enix learning a big lesson. Now you're seeing some veterans start to sound the alarm, more so, some incredibly well-regarded voices in the Eastern gaming space in the form of, yes, Shinji Mikami, speaking of Capcom, and then also Suda 51, coming out talking about censorship in video gaming, okay? Those who do not play games try to prevent people from enjoying the game. Wow! It's almost like they know the entire consultancy hustle and the localizers themselves when they're speaking about this issue. Like most players who actually care about video games and are not just how they can use them as a platform to signal how good of a person they are, forwarding their own ideological bents. The storied Shadows of the Dam creators Goichi, Suda 51 Suda, and Shinji Mikami are not fans of the ongoing attempts, particularly those made by Japanese government, to censor the medium. Yeah, they're talking in that perspective, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, can we extrapolate that out to mean so much more? I think we can. Suda 51, perhaps best known for the director of titles such as, yes, Killer 7, Lollipop Chainsaw. Shout out, that just got a re-release or remaster or something like that. I talked about it before. It's a fun little game. And No More Heroes series, and Mikami, yes, players will recognize, yes, as the director of RE4, God Hand, Vanquish, which I think Mikami and Suda worked together to create Vanquish. Offered their thoughts on the topic during a recent interview given the Japanese video game news outlet GameSpark in a reflection of the upcoming remastered release of their aforementioned action-adventure collaboration Shadows of the Damned. Following a brief discussion of the improvements that made Hella Remastered compared to the original 2011 version of the game, namely improved textures and keyboard mouse support. Okay, translated by DeepL. Two creators were met by the previous admonishments of the content regulations, speaking in Japanese outlet TI's GameWatch, at the time of the original Shadow of the Damned release. Mikami specifically opined, I feel that the scope of what's been allowed in Japan is narrower than what is allowed overseas. Compared to the freedom allowed in other countries, Japan is narrow. In an age of the internet is so widespread, I have the feeling of, why are you saying this now? To which they were asked if the current thoughts on the topic were the same as they were back then. Yeah, things have changed quite a bit since 2021 because, yeah, at that point in time, the Western gaming scene, oh boy, yeah, that was peak. And I don't use that term in like the cringe Gen Z way, but no, BioWare was cooking at that point in time. Rocksteady wasn't, ideologically mind poisoned. The West was, Anyways, in turn, Mikami asserted, my thinking has not changed at all since then. I think that it's a strange situation where there are customers who want to enjoy a game with a unique aspect, and those who do not play the games to try to prevent people from enjoying the game by restricting their enjoyment of the work through regulations. That's right, added Suda. If regulations are imposed, we have no choice but to respond to them as part of our job. But I always wonder what people who play games would think. For example, he continued, if there's a lot of people who buy the PC version of the game on Steam because they want to play it without restrictions, it would be a bit sad, even though it is available on a variety of platforms. It makes me wonder, what are the restrictions for? Who are these restrictions aimed at? I feel that, at the very least, they are not aimed at the customers who play games. Yeah, I know. Sounds about right, doesn't it? Sounds like they're trying to appease to a group of people who are loud on the internet, but never turn up at the cash register. To this end, Mikami then raised the example of Dead Space. Oh man, pour one out for that poor franchise, which at the time of its initial release could not be released in Japan due to regulations. So you wanted to play it in Japan, you had to get the overseas version somehow. Yeah, it was just like how the last incredibly good Mortal Kombat game, MK9, its big reboot, you couldn't get it in Australia until, the Steam release, like years later. Gory, too good. At the time, I had the opportunity to talk with people at the development studio in the United States. Kami recalled. What I still remember vividly is that some of them were in tears saying we couldn't release the game in Japan after all the hard work we put into it. I can say this about the work I was involved in. I can say this about the films that I was involved in, but I am not doing grotesque or splatter films just because I want to express cruelty. I use them as accents in the direction of the film. Yes, it's a difficult issue, Suda further noted, but it would be great if we could create a Zero X, the top rating, yes, in Japan as Zero Z, Computer Entertainment Rating Organization, otherwise known as, yes, it's the equivalent of the American ESRB and Europe's PEGI system. So the expression of the overseas versions could be used in Japan as they are. To this end, their host then inquired, wouldn't it be quite burdensome for to create 2 versions of the game, one for overseas and one for Japan, prompting Suda to confirm, "You are right, it is really hard work because we have to prepare and produce 2 versions of the game. For this remastering, we have to merge the 2 versions that were being developed at the time," he recalled. "And the amount of work involved was tremendous, and it had such an enormous impact that the development period was extended. Anyways, Japanese gamers who want to enjoy the game without any restrictions should buy another copy on Steam." It's interesting, right? Because, yeah, they're talking about government regulations, but that's all downstream from these cultural ones that right now, because we're seeing it in the form of like Dustborn. Take Dustborn, for example, that incredibly woke point and click racism simulator. I think that's about the nicest way that I can put it. Nobody's playing the game, dozens of people bought it, and it's going to be forgotten. Red Thread Studios probably isn't going to close down because they continue to subsist off of taxpayer dollars. You see where the crony corporatism corporatism comes in on this one, because these games don't sell to anybody, okay? They're bolstered by your tax dollars. They are used and promoted by these governments as counter disinformation games. They set the rules, they fund the projects, and the moment that it becomes inopportune, it no longer is fit for service from these places, they begin to strike down more stringent regulations and rules, making things tougher and placing further limitations on art, which I thought that was something that we all kind of came around to, that isn't necessarily good for the medium, but we're not exactly dealing with rational actors. They want to be right more than they want to see the health of an industry. But this is why you've got to stay on top of this stuff. This is why being vocal about the problems that you see in an industry that you care for so much is so damn important, because apathy and indifference at the time when they were marching through the institutions led us to this point. There's no more ground left to secede to these absolute ideologues. Some start fighting back. Time to start telling them that, yeah, your feelings are not more important than other people's expressions. If you think you're going to be offended by something, you don't have to play it. Go ahead, bark up a storm, scream into the void of social media. Perhaps you'll find another freak with a flag in its bio, pronouns in the description. Maybe you guys can become the reply guy to somebody who might care. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.